Well, thank you all for joining. Really appreciate everyone being here. For those in the audience, you made it. This is a hard place to get to. Louise said something about a Visa gift card that was going to everyone who... I'm just kidding, but it is hard, and congratulations. For those joining online, thank you for joining. I'm looking forward to this conversation today. I'll introduce myself. I'm Alan Robbins, Executive Vice President, co-founder of Devex. And I'm looking forward to this conversation on the future of humanitarian payments. So we have great experts here today. Everyone in this room, especially our panelists, I expect know more about these issues in their little fingers than I ever will. So I'm looking forward to learning. I have the enviable position of being the one asking the questions today, not answering these questions. HNPW has been a fantastic week. I've been here for just a couple of days, but looking at the various issues brought up, it's fascinating how there's just so much of the conversation is around the increasing needs in the humanitarian space, and really, in a way, the decreasing resources in the humanitarian space. And I think this is a really good conversation, humanitarian payments, talking about how to get those resources to the people in need, really looking at the micro. Before we get into our discussion, I just want to talk a bit about how we got here to this point. We've been working with Visa now for a few months, looking at, and we kind of got together and thought, what can we bring to the table on this issue of humanitarian payments? And we wanted to bring something new and interesting. And we didn't want it to be sort of what Visa thought about the issue. We didn't want it to be what Devex thought about the issue. So we decided to talk to our audience, the Devex audience. And we spoke to about 1,000 humanitarian experts in the Devex audience through an online survey. We did in-depth interviews with a couple of dozen others. Conducted all sorts of background research. And today is kind of a big day in this journey that we've taken, because we actually launched today our report on this topic, which is called, and you should, if you registered, you should have it in your inbox. I encourage you to have a look at it after the event. But it's called Reimagining Aid in the Digital Age, Building Global Capabilities to Serve Local Needs. As I say, don't read it now, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek on what's in this report. So I'll do this quickly. I've got Carmen Het here, who's going to be my partner in crime, and we're going to go through the report, and then we get Carmen's reactions to some of the findings. I'll have a seat here. So you can just give your look at the screen here. So this is a significant report. It's significant in the terms of its size and its impact, I think. And there's 5 sort of overall broad key findings that we came up with for this report. Please do dig into these more, but just as an overview of the key findings, the first of them is the humanitarian professionals we talked to, they think that choice is really important for making these humanitarian payments and improving the process. You see here, 94% of those surveyed agreed that the ability to offer multiple options for delivery is important. And I think that there is a lot of choice out there, and that's a positive thing. Number 2, inclusivity and accessibility are key. Now, basically, this is, these humanitarian crises, these happen fast. So in planning for these, we need to consider the marginalized, the underserved people in planning, because those are often the individuals that are hardest to reach with these payments. Third is really about speed, efficiency. This is really where technology can come in a lot, looking at sort of new technologies, making sure that fast, efficient, more effective approaches are needed to accelerate and scale aid delivery. Once something happens, it has to be responded to fast. Things like anticipatory action, even using AI, new technologies, things like that can be really useful here. Number 4 is sort of the flip side of speed, which is planning, and looking at longer-term holistic planning to build resilience, facilitate choice, and lead to sustainable outcomes. This is the hard work that's done before crises, after crises, between. All of that hard work is important. Just a few statistics here. Looking at 3 top barriers to the widespread adoption of digital payments. One is limited infrastructure. Second is lack of digital literacy. And then third is lack of sufficient access to mobile devices. Those are the 3 top barriers that the humanitarian experts found. Number 5 is diverse, coordinated, and well-resourced partnerships. This is also hard work. We all talk about partnerships all the time. How do you actually make those partnerships work? And looking at top challenges to the collaboration of actors, a lot of them have to do with this. You have lack of coordination and communication among FSPs as the top one, bureaucracy and policy roadblocks as another. Weak policies on digitization of humanitarian payments is the third one. So these are the 5, as I mentioned, 5 of the top level findings. I encourage you to read the report to dig into them more, hear more about what the experts think. But for now, Carmen, thank you for joining. And I'll introduce Carmen is the treasurer of the UNHCR. Carmen, I've heard that you're quite a celebrity in this space. One of my colleagues, I won't say who they are, was saying that on the streets of Davos, people are stopping and taking sort of selfies of you. So congratulations for that, and thank you for joining.
So yeah, I think we want to put this a little bit alive. I think that we have seen the 5 areas that matter. I think they matter because we are taking care of so many more people in need. So the report, once you will have the pleasure to read the report will tell you that something like 400 million people are in need of aid. And in 22, the system together delivered something like 8 billion. So I think we're talking about a lot of people on the move, a lot of money actually going into that sector. And obviously what we want to do is to have the traceability and the accountability really dollar for dollar, if we can talk in dollars. But so my ambition here is to make sure that we have systems, processes in place that allow us to really deliver end to end. And I have some of the colleagues from UNHCR and other organizations here in the room. This is not one particular pillar that is delivering aid assistance in a coherent way. So you need really to come together. And I think my appeal here is to actually have partnerships, private sector, public sector. We know that the private sector is very agile in innovation, and obviously we in the aid sector, if you like, we don't have these funds to develop, and this is not our forte. This is not where we want to be in, because we are not a software house. We are not developing software per se. But what we do understand is that we are already since many years in 130 countries plus, and we do understand the financial ecosystems in those particular countries and how you access them and how you actually are efficient. So when I was saying that the aid community delivered close to 8 billion, so for every % that you actually can save on that delivery, it actually means more money for the people in need. And I think that we should really be motivated in that, also on collaboration in particular, because if we have a gateway, in the case of UNHCR, we have a gateway, which is the digital hub of Treasury Solution. And that means that we have connectivity, a channel for connectivity with all the payment rails that you possibly can imagine. So if we need to make a transfer to bank, to mobile, to digital wallets, to over-the-counter cash, encashment, all of this needs to be possible. And it needs to be possible in preparedness all the time. So that means we're not waiting for a crisis to break out, and then we're trying to figure out how we're going to orchestrate this. So we need to have really this readiness that we have the rails available, and we have the systems in place, the processes in place, and we just need to switch on, basically, the machine, if I can talk like that, and the funds and the aid can actually be delivered contextually right for that particular country, for that particular crisis, also having a view how we actually can orchestrate this going forward. So it's not a one-off, it's actually making sure that we are ready to deliver going forward. Going forward means inclusive, going forward means digital literacy, going forward means also economic literacy in general, financial literacy. So there's a lot that needs to come together, and it's not one particular section or one particular area in an organization that can deliver this. So I think that personally, I'm very motivated to have such a financial gateway for the UN, but also NGOs, anyone who wants to participate, that we actually can deliver these payments and have commercially the integrations done to commercial partners, whoever they are out there. So, and we also will be able to negotiate much better on that basis, how much volumes we have and how much we need to actually put through. So yeah, that's where we are.
Well, I think that you just really highlighted those 5 key findings just in that point, without trying to necessarily. You talked about all of them, and one of those that you really focused on was choice, and how important sort of using, there's not one best mechanism for anything necessarily. It depends on the local context and other things. Just one of the things that we've spoken about, and I know you've spoken about publicly as well, is UNHCR's use of blockchain technologies. And that's something that I think a lot of people in this space are probably not super familiar with. So can you talk a bit about your work in the blockchain?
Yes. So UNHCR has launched the first of its kind blockchain use case in Ukraine, basically delivering USDC, a stable coin, on the blockchain onto a wallet. And the wallet then has design options to cash out in Ukraine in US dollars, in euros, in hryvnia, in local currency, and have the option to transfer directly onto a bank account. So the blockchain, the mystery on the blockchain, I would say, is that this is an operating system like any other. So if you're writing an email, you're not asking yourself on which platform you're writing an email. The blockchain basically is in a very efficient system that allows to deliver the transaction with speed, low cost, and it's very precise. And it's traceable, it's accountable, and it is compelling. So the technology, I would say, is compelling. What has not changed is the on-ramps and the off-ramps. So when we talk about on-ramps, means that you need the transfer of the value that you're putting onto the wallet needs to come from somewhere. So there needs to be an integration. Usually you have an API payout. So in our case, this use case used USDC from Circle onto the wallet, a Vibrant wallet from Stellar, and they can be different wallets. So you can actually, you can put together this solution in a different way. I'm just explaining to you right now how it works. And it is a use case into Ukraine. Currently, we have delivered more than 2 million on that solution. So it's not our major solution. So I would say that as well. Major solution means that we have other rails that we are using into Ukraine, and for it to be more usable, more user-friendly, that means you need readiness for the recipients to be able to use the smartphone, to be able to handle activation on a wallet. And once the wallet is activated, then of course the wallet is ready and everyone would know how it actually works. But I think the hurdle to overcome is actually for the users to be ready to get the aid in such a way. So if we can transfer money direct into a bank account, into an existing bank account, that's what we are doing right now in Ukraine. This is as fast as using, of course, our blockchain solution. But I think blockchain going forward, you have real-time payment systems currently already being explored in countries using blockchain, but blockchain being connected directly to the local banking system as such, so basically replacing the local banking system or the core banking system, some of it, not all of it. That means you can, within seconds, so these are the real-time payment systems, how you can transfer on a blockchain tokenized local currency from one account to another account. So I think there are many opportunities. We're just at the beginning how central banks start to think about that. And there was a meeting yesterday at BIS. So I would say that if you want to sort of catch up what's happening out there and how the Bank of International Settlement is looking into this, the session is ongoing today as well. So gives huge opportunity. It's not the major modality that we have today. It's definitely a very speedy way of delivery. So it takes about really literally seconds to deliver. So once you have the funding, you can actually deliver. So it's outbound. The key would also be with a blockchain, and if you have a channel, how you can actually fundraise at the same time. So I think people don't think of that, how individual giving, how you could actually, any of us here, if you wanted to give $100, how easy that could be through mechanisms like that. It doesn't mean you have to be in crypto. You can be on any platform, but it would be channeled into the existing payment rails, and they could be blockchain, but they don't have to be blockchain in that sense. So we have two use cases for blockchain, one in Ukraine, one in Argentina. And we are looking where else we can actually employ it, and perhaps with a different configuration, with different off-ramps, because the last mile is still there. So there is no magic happening in that sense. And also the jurisdiction, the regulation, how the transaction is actually settled and where it's settled, and whether the central bank actually will let you in officially with USDC or not. So these are all questions out there on the regulatory side. And each time we go into a use case, obviously we check that. So we are accompanied also by legal, so I can see them here. We are accompanied with legal. So the key is that when we have these use cases, this is serious business. We are not experimenting on the most vulnerable. Mm-hmm. We do actually need to make sure that these solutions can be delivered, and they are delivered, and responsibly we deliver. So I feel quite passionate about that. So I think today we do have solutions that work, and if anyone wants to look into that, we can definitely help them. Yeah.
Great. Well, we could tell that you are passionate about this area, and you're a real leader in the space. We do need to our next panel up now, but I wonder if in 30 seconds, just to help frame that conversation, what is your take on where we stand in the humanitarian payment space? Are we in a good place? Are we improving? Are we, what's your take on where we are right now? Are you optimistic?
Yes. So I think we are improving. There's so much more to do. And I think the key is really collaborative opportunities. So if we want to do this all by ourselves, and the colleagues will come in a minute here to talk about it, it will not work. So I think the key is really how we work together and how we can trust each other. And if one of us has figured out how to do certain things, then we should accept that, and we should take these kind of leads and be able to benefit from that. So if we keep working in pillars, that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Well, Carmen, thank you so much for joining. Again, I encourage everyone here to read our report, and we got into a little bit of it there, but there's a lot more. I'll stand so you can get out, move here. But so I want to bring 4 panelists to our next conversation to discuss these broad issues. Fouad, we got Fouad Diab from the International Organization of Migration. We have Elise Gabaleri from Give Directly, Louise Holden from our partner at Visa, then Alyosha D'Onofrio, who is from the International Rescue Committee. Thank you very much for joining. There's water there if anyone needs it. So, Louise, I'll start with you. Well, thank you so much for this partnership that we've been working with you on. It's been a great time, and I think it's really good to give a voice to all of these humanitarian experts out there to really get a sense of what they've been think is best and what's worked, what hasn't worked, and how we can move forward. But I want to ask you a bit about how Visa has been working. That first one, which is choice, that first key finding that we saw. How has Visa been working in this area to provide choice among humanitarian payments?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. And also a big thanks for all the partners on the panel and all the partners in the room. The whole week is about partnerships. So really exciting to make new ones and develop existing ones. So first of all, let me explain why Visa's in the room. Our purpose is to build payments infrastructure that is fast, connected, transparent, and incredibly secure for organizations and for end users. And we don't just work with merchants and with financial institutions to build this payment infrastructure. We also work directly with humanitarian organizations, governments, multilateral organizations, to deeply understand how they need to move money to individuals in need. And we look at this in both short-term and long-term. Short-term, so the immediate response to a crisis, as well as building robust, connected digital infrastructure to support longer-term recovery, but also support anticipatory aid as well. So being prepared. Inclusivity, one of the points from the report, is essential for that. And what came from all the conversations that we've been having with organizations, but clearly from the report, that choice is really important. We don't just bang the drum for digital payments. I think cash-based transfers has a growing role within humanitarian response, but it works well within a concert of other options, that supports individuals and different local contexts. So we've been focused on bringing that choice, but aggregating that choice for organizations. So choice shouldn't come, I believe, at higher cost for organizations and agencies and for donors. So aggregation is an opportunity to kind of downstream some of the increased kind of contract and kind of partnership relationships that are required to deliver choice at the last mile. We don't just work from an ivory tower in London. We work with all of our country and regional offices who have individual partnerships with organizations, FSPs, local networks, humanitarian organizations on the ground to make sure that we can deliver choice at the last mile. And partnerships are key for choice. So some of the partnerships that we have been working on recently include cash. So cash is always going to be a component of humanitarian response. There are contexts and situations where real cash is important. So we have a relationship with a global cash out partner. So where cash is needed, we can turn on cash for humanitarian organizations. We also particularly focus on specialist financial services providers within the last mile. And that's really important because those organizations have got the nuance and the understanding and the connections within the local environment. One example is an organization that we're working with in Colombia called Avance. And they have developed a suite of solutions off a digital app, particularly focused on Venezuelan refugees who have made the journey into Colombia. This is a solution that provides not only the ability for organizations to provide aid to the Venezuelan refugees, but it also gives the individuals an opportunity to make remittance payments, P2P payments, pay their services and bills through a bank account or through the banking system, but also cash out. A really cool solution that offers choice to agencies and choice to individuals. We found it, we saw it, we thought, right, we're going to support this to help ramp up, to scale, and make it available to other organizations. So where we can, FSP organizations, we will help tailor, support, and ramp up. Another example is the work that we're doing with Oxfam. And this is related to anticipatory kind of climate response. We're partnering with Oxfam US to support anticipatory climate response into multiple geographies. They have a number of programs working in the Philippines. What's important for the recipients of the support from Oxfam is that they can cash out and they can access the support that Oxfam gives them within the right modality and the right kind of tools that they need. So the program's working very well in the Philippines. We work with the local FSPs and the wallet provider to be able to support, to tailor, and then to scale into other geographies. So it's aggregation, but it's aggregation delivering choice, and choice through partners. So the key themes: partnership, inclusivity, and choice. Mm-hmm.
And those are three of them in the report, and then planning, which it sounds like
Yes.
you're doing.
Yeah.
And what was the other one? Choice, efficiency.
Yes.
Fast and efficient, which hopefully is happening. Actually, speaking about fast and efficient, Elisa, maybe I'll jump to you now. Give Directly is is in the news a lot now, and is sort of getting a lot of attention for your model about getting aid directly to people, getting payments directly to people. Can you talk a bit about that model and sort of what makes it different?
Sure. Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. So just to start, as Alan mentioned, so Give Directly is kind of modus operandi is that we do direct cash, unconditional cash to people living in poverty and affected by humanitarian crisis. That's really based on the belief that people know better what their needs are, when they want to meet them, when they want to prioritize them, and how to meet them. And when I say about cash, it's really talking about digital payments. That's our preferred way of delivering aid because of, I think, the narrative we're all familiar with about security, about efficiency, and speed. It's one of them, right? So that's kind of what we do. But cash is so flexible. That's by definition, that can really do a lot of things. And so, especially when we look at humanitarian context as emergency response, we really need to keep in mind and ask ourselves: are we really doing everything that we can to harness the potential of cash in those contexts? And speaking about, since we're talking about rapidity and kind of long-term planning and efficiency, when we look at emergency response, there's usually two things that come to mind, right? One is the need for speed. Obviously, people have immediate needs, have immediate basic survival needs that they need to meet. And so we need to have a quick solution or a quick way to reaching them. The other thing that we need to keep in mind, which I'm really glad it also comes out of the report, is the need for flexibility, the need for choice. People's need, especially in a humanitarian crisis after emergency, change not only from household to household, but from day to day, from hour to hour. And so having that flexibility in the way we deliver aid is really important. However, I think historically or generally in the humanitarian sector, cash hasn't been the first thing that comes to mind when we think about emergency response. Or I think, if we think about a fast way of delivering aid after a sudden onset emergency, cash is often not the first thing that comes to mind. And that's because just in kind, it's what kind of we're more used to. We have proven that in kind can be fast, can be efficient, can reach scale, and so that's kind of what we default to. And in a way, the humanitarian sector is kind of not necessarily built or set up to make cash easy, right? Like we assume that cash is not feasible, and then we really proved that it is. And so, yeah.
Cut you off there. There's a in the report there was a number that you know, in talking to the humanitarian experts, a number that came out, and I don't remember the exact statistic, but something like 75% of the respondents thought that there was a security risk in cash, and I think there's a perception out there, but it doesn't seem, we didn't really find proof that it's an actual problem, that it's a perceived problem, but it's an actual problem. What are your thoughts on that?
Totally. I think it is one of the elements that, as I was mentioning, kind of makes the humanitarian sector kind of, it seems like we're looking for reasons not to do cash in this emergency context, right? And sometimes security is brought up. Sometimes it's because it's too complex, because you do need partnerships. Like, and you know, I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's easy to set up all those partnerships up, but it is possible, and that can really be a game changer. And when we talk about security, it's really about being ready, kind of having thought those things through before. And so at Give Directly, or going back to the question of like Give Directly's model, at Give Directly, we're really looking at how to make the case and prove and explore that cash can be fast, can be effective, can really unleash the potential of choice, of flexibility, also in emergency context. And we do that by investing in what we call it different ways, but one way is like digital preparedness, digital prepositioning. So we know that it's true, right? To do cash, you need the partnerships. You need to figure out how to identify people, make sure they have a payment mechanism, find a way of sending this money, etc. But often when we talk about emergency context, our cash preparedness doesn't go that far. You know, if we're lucky, it goes to like having some contract with a financial service provider. But it's really like a whole lot of work that we could do ahead of the crisis, ahead of the humanitarian crisis, to prove the point, to make the case for cash becoming a fast modality. And so at Give Directly, we've done this model in about 8 contexts so far, 8 countries. Is what we call mobile aid. That's how it's usually kind of also talked about. That really relies on using data from telcos, so from private sector, from government registries, from social registries, from other private sector actors that have like data on people to identify people in at-risk areas. We set up the whole verification system in advance, which again, takes work, but it is possible. About how do we identify them, how do we verify them, how do we make sure they have a payment mechanism. And this also takes going into the communities ahead of time to do sensitization, to make sure they have a voice in what we're doing. And then this allows us to be really quick when the emergency happens. And we've seen this in different contexts. In Nigeria floods, we did a response with this model, and we were 3 to 4 times faster at reaching recipients than any other organization. In DRC, Kinshasa, we did a similar project for COVID relief, and within the first 3 days of the project, we identified and paid almost 20,000 people. So it can really be a game changer. And really kind of going back to what the emergency we need, right? We need the choice and we need the speed. And so far, cash is not the first thing that comes to mind. But what we see is that if we put up the work before, there's really a lot more that we can do to harness that potential. And so that's kind of what we are looking at exploring at Give Directly with, by setting up those partnerships and those pipes that we need to do better when the emergency comes.
Now, one of your friends in those those partnerships might be IOM, and Fouad, you lead the CBI team there. How are you working with cash-based interventions to help protect against future resilience, build future resilience in communities?
Thank you, Alan, and welcome everyone, and thank you for listening to us. Good morning for those that are in the room, and good afternoon for those who are listening to us from other places. So first, I'm happy to be here, and actually I'm happy that today I don't have to play the role of the strongest advocate of cash. I mean, we're all here, most of us, supporting cash, and usually I'm the one that's like taking the CBI cash that we call CBI and IOM, the manual, and saying like, yes, you need to do more cash. Cash is great. We need to do more cash. Exactly what you were saying, and going around. But today I'm going to bring back the discussion to sustainability, to resilience, and to try to see how can we change the lens that we're looking at our same projects without the need to change everything we do. We might change little bits and pieces and make sure that our programs or our projects are more sustainable, allow the beneficiaries, or we call them now recipients, the people in need, to reach where they want and find solutions that will help us to slowly cope with this and decrease in the level of funding that we receive in general. We all see now the needs are increasing, the humanitarian funding is decreasing. Yes, we need to help more, do less wars, but what can we do? This is what we've given. So in this case, what we try to do is to, yes, it's good to see solutions. And I came here prepared to be more on the offensive or defensive, but no, when I looked at your first 5 findings, I feel, and also after hearing Louise, I see that yes, you've been looking at the choice, inclusivity, all of this. What we need to do is to reiterate on the need to find solutions that are not parachuted or imposed on the people. We need to start bottom up. We need to see what is the problem. Is it inclusivity? Is it lack of connection? Is it lack of identity documents, which is something we deal a lot with? Is it a lot of movement? And then from there, build a solution that is providing the assistance in the way that people need it, which will allow us to reach our solutions. Now, yes, and this will go back to the model, like, do we want to continue giving the fish every day or the fishing rod? Now, I know the answer, but the fishing rod is also not enough. We need to provide also the technical assistance, the sensitization. When we're talking about digitalization or digitization, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's not only doing the system, but also making sure that the people know how to use it, or else some people might be able to abuse it. Starting from governments to local authorities to other people in the field. Also, our staff, our people need to be trained on how to use it. Now, in terms of sustainability, I will speak about 3 models, kind of what things that we can do and what we're trying to do. And I'm not saying we're there yet. We're trying as much as possible. The easiest one that everyone thinks of is, yes, let's link our cash assistance to social protection. And this is something that we all try to do as much as possible. And this is the first thing that we can think of wherever it's possible. Now, it's not always possible. So we have some examples, such as in Slovakia, together with our colleagues from other agencies, we have managed to link our cash assistance to the government cash assistance. From our side in IOM, we're working on people with disabilities, or supporting people with disabilities. Other agencies were taking other partners, other parts of the community. And then we managed to transfer this to the government. In other places where there's maybe less of pertinent role played by the government, we can always try to support local authorities or local communities. I mean, example, in Djibouti, we've been working together with local communities on setting up recycling plants where our cash support program is gradually being transferred to the community where they can continue collecting plastic waste and recycling it. In other places where we're not talking only about the government in here, but also in places where we have, let's say, protracted situations. I'll give examples such as in Iraq or Pakistan or other protracted situations, also Ukraine before the current crisis. We've been working on providing, of course, we will always provide the humanitarian assistance, but also to try to provide recipients with support to start up businesses, for example, and also linking with private sector, such as we're working on Haiti, but now it's a bit interrupted because what's happening on linking returnees from the US to Haiti with private sector companies, where they will start on a support from IO, and after that they will be hired by these companies. So yes, partnership is also very important, not only with partners, with government and with UN, but also with the private sector on this. Also, the third point I want to raise is places where we provide assistance to people where we know that there will be yearly floods, yearly drought, cold seasons, all of this. So, for example, I would say in Philippines, in Nigeria, and also in Haiti and DRC and Somalia, we know drought is going to happen every year or every other year. We know the rainy season is going to happen every year. We know it's going to be cold in December every year. So here we try to support the people not only through cash payouts, but also through technical support. For example, in the Philippines, where we're helping people reinforce their shelters to be typhoon ready once a typhoon hit, for example. Case studies are a lot. We have more and more to share. And I'm sure other agencies around the room might have even more. So what we need to do is to exchange as much information as possible. And to go back to what was brought in the beginning, alone will not be able to save the world. What we need to do is to work together to be able to deliver our assistance in a better and more coordinated way. And my last point in here is that cash is great. Let's do more cash. But at the same time, let's look at comprehensive programming. Let's make sure that we have these complementary activities in there to make sure that every dollar or euro or franc we're distributing is being used by the community and to deliver them to the right path and give them solutions. Thank you.
And I do think that's important to, when I think of cash, I'm thinking of like bags of cash, right? And I think it's important that that's not necessarily the case. It's these electronic payments and other things, and the ultimate result is cash, but it's not necessarily bags of cash. So I think that is an important note for those not super familiar with this space. Alyosha, the IRC is obviously one of the biggest NGOs working in this space. Can you talk a bit about where you see, what you're seeing in sort of innovations and partnerships and other things you've been working on in this humanitarian payment space?
Sure, happy to. So I feel like my colleagues already done quite a good job of describing the partnership landscape, the rich kind of network of partnerships that are necessary to any and all of us to operate. I guess over and above what's already been mentioned, it's worth calling out the strong engagement in kind of global bodies for learning, so the CALT network, the Collaborative Cash Delivery Network. There are places where we can come together and work on issues of interoperability, on issues of on learning, on sharing best practices and so on. So I did just want to call that out. But coming back to the act of delivery and the partnerships around delivery, I think it's worth thinking about, if you like, the three facets and our degree of comfort with those three facets. So we talk about there's a lot of mention of civil society and the private sector, much less mention of national government in the course of the conversation today. I'm glad to be hearing that from my colleague from IOM. But I think interesting just to see where our comfort zone lies, and something that I think is worth calling out in a week that has got partnership in the title, in a week that has got the word humanitarian in the title, and just being quite clear that as humanitarians we have an awful lot of hang-ups around these words neutrality and impartiality. So much as we like to fantasize and talk about the nexus and development approaches, we actually struggle to implement that. I'm reminded by one of our audience members of a study done quite early in the Ukraine response around whether we could, as responders, make use of the Ukraine social protection structure and system and lists and so on. So my first question to the audience when we get to Q&A is, Do we have much to show for that? My suspicion is probably not, despite attempts to try and push in that direction. So I think interesting to dig into where our comfort zone is and how we can push beyond that comfort zone. That said, of course, a large part of the partnership, the networks that we tap into are around those with the greatest knowledge of the situation, the context in any particular locality in which we're trying to intervene, whether those are local FSPs, whether those are local civil society organizations who have the insights and the contextual knowledge that are absolutely essential to setting cash delivery systems up rapidly and efficiently. So I don't want to take us fully off into a national government direction, but I did just want to call that out to say that I think this is a bit of a gap in our ways of working and even in the way we conceptualize the landscape and the things that we pay attention to. I think so the other thing I want to say about partnerships is having as a sector, as an industry, having been quite bad at partnerships for quite a long time, we've got into the habit of fetishizing them now. And I think it's really, really important to always be asking the question, partnership to what end? And so I'm worried that I'm hearing two very contradictory, not in this room, but in the industry generally, I'm hearing two very contradictory narratives. One is about efficiency, and one is about partnership. And those two things don't always drive together unless you ask the right questions about why you're partnering. Now, again, coming back to people in this room, I'm very delighted to say, we've had great and are having great opportunities to partner where each agency brings exactly something distinct, something different, something that adds value, where we're not tripping over each other's mandates or areas of expertise, where we're actually building something different and new. And I think that's the essence of a good partnership, and something I would like to see us leading into very, very much. I can go on forever, but I'm sure you would like me to shut up soon.
No. Sorry. Yeah, not at all. And no, it's really interesting. And partnership is such a useful word that we all use all the time, but they're hard. They're hard to do, and sometimes, you hate to say it, but sometimes it might be, occasionally, now the report says otherwise, but occasionally it might feel easier to just do it on your own.
No, but it's not about doing it on your own. It's about picking the right partnerships to get to inclusivity, speed, choice. There are transaction costs involved in any partnership, rightly so, right? You need to understand the other, you need to be respectful of the other, you need to actually be both bringing something important to the table. And so it's how you do that, and when you do that, needs to be well informed by what it is you're trying to achieve. So what's the superordinate goal that you're trying to get to?
And it's hard work. And actually, I want to do a quick follow-up with you, because there's been, we've been talking a lot about cash and sort of the direct aid. But one of the things, I think that there is still a place for indirect aid, in-kind work, like that sort of thing. I think you're the person here who's kind of covers the entire spectrum. What do you think? Like, do you think that do you think in ahead, like when one is going to work better than another, or just depends on the context? How do you make that choice?
It absolutely depends on the context. I do want to come back to the point that was raised, though, by Elisa, that actually the assumptions we make about in-kind and the assumptions we make about cash are not fair. They're not playing on a level playing field. And I think so we make assumptions about the market, we make assumptions about need, and we make assumptions about the security of the delivery mechanism. And it's, we have plenty of examples within the history of humanitarian assistance of in-kind things being channeled off and sold elsewhere. And, so all those fears that one might have about cash are equally applicable to in-kind, if not more so to in-kind assistance, because quite frankly, if you set up your digital payment system well, you've got more traceability over the cash payment than you perhaps do over the in-kind distribution, which is generally not as it doesn't have quite the same sophisticated tracking system attached. So, there are so all of which to say, yes, there are absolutely moments where in-kind systems, like or for that matter, to forwards. But if we're looking at something that's about a comprehensive service to a remote population, I mean, it's not by giving cash to people that you're going to get zero-dose children vaccinated, right? If there is no cold chain, if there is no ability to access areas without negotiating with armed groups, there's a whole set of other interventions that are required to solve that problem. So cash is not the
And you need a functioning market,
et cetera. Exactly.
So I feel that we can't really do a conversation in 2024 without talking about AI, right? We haven't talked about it yet, and now's the time. And I think one of the areas that AI could play a big role in this space is looking at the anticipatory action and looking at climate events and other sort of natural disasters. I think, Elisa, you Give Directly's worked on this stuff. How have you included AI into your work?
Yeah, I can kick it off. So indeed, AI is part of the work we do to kind of develop our model to deliver cash directly to people more quickly, more efficiently, and more effectively. We kind of we've been looking at AI, using AI, and we've been testing using AI in two main contexts. One is for targeting, so what I was talking about before in terms of using data to quickly identify and enroll people in affected areas that are most vulnerable after an emergency, etc. We've been working with partners, again, because none of us has the whole package of knowledge, working with partners to really develop, use AI to predict who's going to be the most vulnerable, where people might move after an emergency, etc., so that we can assist them more quickly after that happens. And then the other big area where we've been using AI is indeed in forecasting for anticipatory action. So in particular, flood forecasting, we've done that in Mozambique, we're doing that in Nigeria, we're doing that in Bangladesh as well. And so bringing together different data sources and using AI and machine learning to predict who's going to be most affected by floods, who are the people that are also going to be most affected, and how can we prioritize those areas and those people for delivering assistance ahead of the flood. And so, for example, in Mozambique, which was a recent example from last year, within 3 days from the flood trigger, we were able to pay almost 10,000 people. And so that's part of what AI enables. And so we're kind of really working on scaling up this model to other contexts. I think one thing that I think is worth mentioning with AI is that the other big area, right, that comes when we do kind of this remote digital AI-based model is what about the people? Aren't we losing kind of that connection with people, etc.? And I think that kind of takes two things. On one hand, is never missing out on the pre-work, on the sensitization of working with communities to make sure that this just doesn't fall from the sky and they have a voice in how we shape all of these initiatives. But then secondly, we've done recently some research around how people perceive this type of models, like people in communities perceive this type of models where they're data-based, they're AI-based, etc. And one interesting thing that came out is that it's actually not as disruptive. What often people find more disruptive is those 30 survey questions, 30 questions long surveys that we ask after an emergency to kind of really understand all the details of people's needs. So I think—
Don't be bashing surveys.
No. I'm not bashing surveys. But that to say that I think sometimes it's really actually important to also kind of bring that perspective. And when we think about AI, it's important not to miss out on kind of bringing in that perspective as well, so that we don't lose sight on what we're really trying to do here.
Great. So I think let's put a pin in that, and I'd love to hear if we have time to some AI. But we're going to do some audience, get the audience involved here with some questions. Wow, it looks like we have a really engaged audience. I've already seen a couple of hands, but I'm going to start actually. I'll get to you. But actually, right next to you is Joseph Oliveras from IFRC. And just wanted to get your, from the audience observing sort of what you're hearing here, some of your thoughts about what you've heard so far.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks to the host and to the panelists. This definitely is a very important topic and these insights. I hope it's just the beginning of a conversation. It's really good to see representatives from both the humanitarian sector, but also the private sector. I think with this theme of the partnerships, it's important that, and I believe that the report is also trying to emphasize this, is that we need to be working more together. We need to have more constructive dialogue. We need to have more concrete actions, and we need to treat each other's more like partners versus the traditional ways of client and service provider, which of course there's power imbalance and there's, we lose the opportunity to really harness the expertise from both sides. So it's really good that that is emphasized in this forum. The IFRC, we are supporting our 191 local Red Cross and Red Crescent national societies to use and scale up cash assistance when feasible and when it is appropriate. And we have been striving to provide that choice. So it's really good to see that this is being emphasized in this report. And we know that sometimes it is not easy, but it is, having this, making this effort to really talk to the communities, understanding what's in it for them through community engagement is one key factor that really needs, it cannot be overemphasized. But despite the challenges, and I think you've highlighted also some of the barriers in some of those slides, we know that, and we have seen that digital solutions and digital payments could be a real game changer in the way that we are providing assistance in general. We have seen during the COVID-19 response, for instance, that mindsets have changed when digital payments were the only effective means to really provide assistance to people who were otherwise not very easy to reach. During the Ukraine crisis response, at least in the onset, we have seen our national societies that have very little resources to mobilize and provide direct assistance to thousands of people fleeing Ukraine, and also not having the experience in actually providing cash, where we have developed a mobile application that is linked to a global payment solution. All of a sudden, they have the tools that are appropriate for the context that they're providing, and they were able to do cash, but really do it at scale, given the experience the limited experience that they've had. We are also working within the IFRC this concept of integrated assistance, which kind of mirrors some of what Fuad said around the comprehensive services. The idea, at least for us, is that we would want for affected communities to see and discover more of those services and assistance, and again, not just limited to cash-based interventions, but also in kind where it's appropriate, but of course services. And I think that's maybe one thing that might be not entirely highlighted in the report, is that we are also providing different types of services, be it health services and or facilitation thereof. So having a place where affected people can see what services are available to them, particularly for the vulnerable migrants who are moving across borders, and having the tools such as a mobile app that is linked to, again, global payments, or a way to be referred to organizations that have those specialized services, again, working together. And we need these expertise. We need experts from, who are more familiar with the technology. Again, we're also not in the software business, as was mentioned earlier on, and we're not also the financial experts. So really relying on these joint expertise is really, really key. And maybe one last thing to maybe put a question on the table. We're trying to promote, most of the recommendations are really for humanitarian organizations, but how do we, as humanitarian organizations and private sector companies, how do we ensure that there's strong balance and good balance between the benefits from our institutions and also to that benefits to the affected communities? Because sometimes the benefits are not equal, and we do have to make a choice. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, Joseph. I don't know if there's any reactions to that from the panel. Luis?
I'd love to
Sure.
dig in. So Joseph, thank you so much for that intervention. Really appreciate it. One of the consistent themes, I think throughout the whole of the week is how do we as a sector, and I'm going to include donors, private sector, humanitarian organisations into this whole mix, how do we collectively support and reach more individuals with declining growth resources? So how do we do more with less? And we talk about collaboration and we talk about partnership. And there's lots of lessons that we can learn from how we collaborate and at what stage do we collaborate, and how we can combine our respective skills, infrastructures, experience to be able to do more with less. And just particularly picking up on the point that you made around, are we supplier, buyer, or are we partner? And just kind of representing the private sector here and reflecting a fantastic collaboration that we currently have with IFC. If we as private sector are able to deeply understand the challenges that you are facing, the geographies in which you're focused on, the solution gaps that you have, we're able as an organisation to bring the experience and the expertise and the innovation skills to help build, create, and develop propositions which are available to the sector as a whole. I've found in my experience of working within the sector that if we are just responding to RFPs, we're only responding to what is put down in a procurement notice. And the rate of innovation and change and evolution within the whole sector and within the private sector organisations who are looking to support the sector is so fast and so rapid and so committed that sometimes I think the RFPs don't reflect the full capability of the private sector support and experience. So my plea and my request is I absolutely would like to be at the table having those conversations prior to the RFP, because it enables private sector organisations to be a better partner and a more creative partner, and a partner which earlier on you can recognise that we share a vision. And you talk about who gets to benefit. I think it's really important that we have those conversations early on, so that we have a shared vision and we have a shared kind of operating model. So that's just the kind of response from private sector. I think we can be better partners and better and create better solutions for you and support more longer term infrastructure if we're at the table having the conversations prior to the RFP. But thank you for that intervention.
One thing that I've been, I was actually having a conversation last evening about this event, HMPW, and it's a great event. It's fantastic, so amazing, and there's not enough private sector there, right? Like it's something that really there should be more sort of corporations here and engaging. So I think that's a great point, Louise. Yes, now we'll do some Q&A. I have a question here. We can take 3. Why don't we take 3 as a go? So do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So Paul Harvey, Humanitarian Outcomes. I've been working on a CAS for a while, and I remember one of the early discussions about scale, and the NGOs in the room were saying we're trying to get up to tens of thousands of people that we can get CAS to people, and I was arguing you need to raise your expectations to hundreds of thousands, and then Visa stood up and said, well, we have a different idea of scale. And one of the early examples of a scaled response was when Visa partnered with the government of Pakistan and got CAS to 2 million people pretty quickly and effectively after the floods in 2010. So picking up Alyosha's point, I guess the question to the panel is, do you think that the future of humanitarian payments should be less about aid agencies and more about governments? And then I guess the question comment was 2 places where I think you are needed right now as aid agencies is definitely Gaza and Sudan. I think there's an amazing story in Gaza about how CAS has been able to continue, but a really depressing story in Sudan about the failure to scale CAS. So any thoughts about how you could be doing better in Sudan?
Okay, well, let's put a pin in that for a second. We'll get to it. And number 2, the white shirt here.
Thank you very much. I'm Erica Moret from the Graduate Institute and also from a Swiss not-for-profit called Polysync, where we have innovation for humanitarian payments. So Thank you very much for the great talks today. One of the initiatives we've been working on, funded by the European Commission and the Swiss FDFA, has been in conjunction with Norwegian Refugee Council, where we're seeking to find technical solutions to the problem of financial sector de-risking, where we're seeing this growing problem of banking channels pretty much collapsing to a growing number of countries around the world, largely concentrated in the middle mile in terms of correspondent banks, which are becoming unwilling to be involved in any type of transactions. And what I'm wondering is, to what extent do you think that digital payment solutions that exist today or are being developed can seek to mitigate some of these problems of countries that are now heavily or entirely unbanked, particularly in sanctioned jurisdictions where payments to central banks, to government entities, or to local banks may not be possible as well? Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And we'll take one more in the blazer there, yes.
Thanks so much. Joshua Levins with the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement, country-led movement of 66 countries. My question, and I really appreciated the outline both on sustainability of this as well as the need to engage with governments. And so my question is, understanding that there are all of these different contexts in which cash points will vary dramatically by country in terms of the ability to reach the last mile, can you articulate a kind of advocacy agenda that you would promote with national governments to make, I guess, with ministries of finance, with local government authorities and others, that would see the ability of cash payments to reach more local areas increase, what that advocacy agenda would look like, and also great if you could articulate some of the other benefits of those very same policies, not just for processing cash assistance, but maybe expanding credit or opportunities to better engage the private sector, et cetera. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so basically, we have a question here on, we'll say, just to do it short, I'll say sort of national governments, the importance of national governments versus sort of the aid agencies. About another question about advocacy. Another question about those areas that are unbanked and how to reach those with these sorts of payments. Anyone want to take any of those three? Fuad, you look interested.
Well, well, these are questions that will take some time to answer fully, but maybe we can try to lump them a bit and then to focus a bit on the government.
And sorry, I should actually bring Carmen into this as well if she wants to add, but go ahead but feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, on the government side, again, and to go back to the example of Pakistan or others, sometimes we arrive and then we think that we are going to solve the situation. We're going to save this country, and then we come in and they were putting in some proposals, and we have some funds coming in. But then we look on the other side, and the governments do have a lot to put in. Sometimes the issue is that they might need some tools. Sometimes they might need the political, let's say, agreement around being able to provide or letting them provide the assistance. So yes, governments needs to be involved much more, if this was the first question. No, we are not involving the governments as much as we should. That's the second one. And in the end, we are there for a limited period of time. If we want any assistance that we provide to be more sustainable, it needs to happen through the government. Now, this is much easily said than done. We've been trying since from my side, in the last 4 years since I moved to Geneva, trying to work more on this from our side. But we are facing a lot of difficulties in here. The main difficulties that we're finding is that in some places, government do not necessarily agree on the need to provide assistance to a portion of the population. From my side, as representing the migration agency, it's already difficult to ask governments in some places to provide assistance to some portion of the population, of their own population. And if we come and say, yes, now you have to provide assistance to migrants as well, and this is where they're like, okay, it's too much. So there's a lot of challenges. And yes, we can say it. Other thing with the government is the issue of payments, as you're saying. So if you link to the payments, yes, the issue in Sudan now, it's not. Or the same issue happened in Tigray before with Ethiopia, or in Afghanistan, or in other places. The thing is that, and this is something that maybe I can ask, maybe I'll pass it to Louise or someone else later on, the channels to get money into the country. So yes, we're talking about having long-term agreements with either Visa or others, but then the issue is that what do we do in places where there are sanctions, where the banking system stops, where we're not able to move the money in. From our side, we found these are places where we would go back to in-kind assistance. I mean, first, for us, if we're going to do cash assistance, we need to have functioning markets, we need to have operational systems in place, we need to have the operational capacity as well. If this is not existing, then we go back to in-kind assistance. But then before we get there, yes, you are right, we need to discuss how can we advocate for more flexibility on that. And this, I know that Carmen, you were discussing also with our treasurer and other treasurers on ways to channel money into some countries in these cases. So I don't know if Louise or Carmen want to, who do I pass the baton to?
So I think in the case for the UN system, so we have options to get cash into countries, like for example Afghanistan. So we have been upholding cash into Afghanistan with the UN system, of course in compliance with all the regulations and so forth. So I think for this, and that's why as the treasurer, I'm particularly interested obviously in managing the liquidity going into a country and how in the country where you use still the ecosystem like the commercial banks, usually even in Sudan, you still have the banking system that is actually working. So the key is how you get the cash in an orderly way and how you can actually have systems in the country that basically gets the money where it needs to go. This is doable even in Sudan. So I've been quite a bit involved with the operations myself, how to get the cash from A to B, and it's a very difficult environment. I think we come back to the mapping of each and every country, what needs to happen. And often, I would say, the local merchants, the local ecosystem, we need to be able to access them. And UN treasurers, we are very well versed in all the 130 countries plus that we are in, how we actually do that and how we do this responsibly, and that the cash actually can then be delivered. And then obviously, we arrange like a financial supply chain to some extent that we can still trace the cash. So it's not just about getting the cash into the country, but then it's getting that cash exactly where it needs to go, and that we still have that traceability. And in fact, right now I'm working with a particular use case in Afghanistan, among all places, to actually establish that. So we have the traceability in Afghanistan to make sure that this money can actually go where it's meant to go once it gets there. So I think it needs financial know-how, where treasurers are. This is our bread and butter to discuss if obviously the central bank is still functional. That's one thing, and if they are, then we need to involve the systems that are already existing. And if we can improve them with technology, then we should do that. So we are actually leaving a sustainable system behind, not, that we have a delivery and then we're leaving and next time we have the same issue. I think Sudan is already, since some time, a difficult area where we haven't solved the problems entirely, Sudan. So it's
Oh, sorry to
it's
cut
fine.
you off there. We are running low on time here. It's gone fast, but thank you. But I think that any comments on the reaching the unbanked is one, and then the other one is advocacy agenda.
I'll pick up on the unbanked, because I 100%, I'm so pleased that the superstar replied to that question, because entirely support what you just said. I think there's always a way. Now, there's a connected, interoperable mechanism of transferring funds from one country to another country, whether it be by blockchain, whether it be through a payments infrastructure, which can reach many countries, but doesn't necessarily reach all the individuals in that one country, and sometimes doesn't reach countries. So it's bottom-up understanding, mapping, partnerships on the ground to understand where those gaps are. And the final distribution, whether it be through the existing banking system, or whether it be through a coalition of partners, cash-out agents, closed-loop digital voucher solutions, or others, there's always a mechanism, I believe, that's available in countries. But we as organisations need to collaborate and get our heads together to understand how to reach that last mile. Going to the point of kind of understanding some of the innovation in the sector, and the report, I think, talks about Red Rose and some of the other kind of aggregator fintech organisations that have been particularly kind of operating in this space. But there are organisations out there who can reach fragile, low connectivity, low infrastructure regions within a geography, and support a digital aid payment to an individual which is offline. And doesn't need to have connectivity and doesn't need to have existing banking infrastructure. So there are partners and mechanisms to fill the gaps where there are gaps. But the principle is, how can we as a sector make sure that 100% of aid is delivered through a suite of solutions, rather than falling short as an as a sector and only being able to support 85% or 90%. There are ways to close the gap through the partners and through the organisations that are available to us. And by greater collaboration and greater partnership, I think that we can increase the awareness and recognition of how to solve for that.
That's fantastic, Louise. And I think we've run out of time, unfortunately. Oh, Richard, sorry, you look like you need to say something.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Alexandre Cabaret with Devex. I'd like to bring some of the online questions. Maybe we'll stick to one. I have several, but I have a question from Raymond Crick from Norwegian Refugee Council, who's asking about the technical debt of this solution. So I'll read the full question. So Raymond is digital advisor at NRC, and he's asking, if we're looking at bottoms-up solution, which Fouad was talking about, how can we deploy these systems in a timely manner without building bespoke solutions that are time and resources to develop and train staff? How can we do this in consortium without creating technical debt across the humanitarian sector? So, yeah, I don't know if maybe Louise or Fouad can answer to this.
Okay, since you pointed at me. So yes, you're right. Cash assistance using a technical advanced solution might take time to prepare. And that's why, as we were saying in the beginning, some of my colleagues were saying that in-kind assistance has been the traditional way of responding to urgent emergencies. However, we are living in a world where we're not supposed to be surprised when we see tomorrow a flood happening somewhere or a crisis happening somewhere or that. That's why what we need to do, and this is something that maybe a call to our organizations as well to our donors, to start putting more support into preparedness, into preparing our system from before. Because if we know that we're working, and from our side in IOM, we're doing cash assistance already in 112 countries. So if already we have some funds or some resources on the side to do start preparedness and see which solutions work in which context, and we try to consolidate them and divide them into different solutions, and for each place a solution. And of course, this will be much easier if we work together with Unhcr, with UNICEF, with OFE, with all of us, and local NGOs and international NGOs, to have these solutions ready, so that as soon as something happens, we can deploy the system and put it into use, and we will save a lot of time. Now, yes, this will cost us a lot of time in preparing, but then we will cash it back very quickly once the thing happens, when the emergency hits. Thank you.
Any other comments on that? Great. Well, I think we are running out of time. It looks like there's not people banging in to get into the room, so that's good news. So I think we might have 2 minutes if anyone has any final thoughts that they wanted to leave the audience with.
So one is two quick thoughts. One is a reaction to Paul and less about aid agencies, more about government. And I think all I would say to that very quickly is I think we need to apply the same reflex to government that we have gradually and reluctantly learnt about markets. So there is we need to ask questions as to why and how and what's going on, and not make assumptions all the time. To Fouad's point, I think there is a certain predictability about the kind of problems we're facing in many cases. So there is time to build the relationships and get over that potential worry of speed versus bureaucracy. The other closing thought was really just about donors and what donors can do differently. I think there is we often think about, well, what would we need? What would be nice? What would help us get to a better delivery system? And often we'll come up with things like flexible funding or multi-year funding. And these are obviously true and good and all well, but all useful. But I think the most important thing is to incentivize efficiency. And I think there's a lot. So Louise, you were talking about how RFPs disincentivize innovation on some level or constrain it in certain ways. I mean, there are so many ways that the way that funding is channeled constrains and structures what happens. And I think, asking, first and foremost, being open about defining funding in terms of the outcomes you seek rather than the specific delivery modalities you seek is a huge difference. It allows that question of, well, why not give cash, which otherwise is already excluded from the conversation because you've said, I need a sanitation project here or whatever it is. So I think just having a different way of actually allocating resources and focusing on outcomes, not inputs and activities, I think is really important.
Great.
Voilà.
Elisa?
Yeah, could I just add one point to that? Because I think that's a very important one in terms of the role that donors could play, right? And indeed, I really like the framing of focusing on outcomes rather than delivery mechanisms, etc. Because ultimately, it is about empowering the people that we serve, right? And so that's where the focus should be. And I was yesterday actually in a session in this room facilitated by Ground Truth Solution about participation washing. And one of the panelists made a very good point about change in the humanitarian sector is usually supply driven rather than demand driven, right? So it's the donor that creates the incentive and then actually things start to happen. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, especially as we have these conversations with donors, hopefully ahead of an RFP, in terms of our ultimate objective is to empower the people. Now we as intermediary, because that's what we are, we need to have the means to make those best choices when the time comes. And so it's really about looking at the outcomes, breaking kind of those silos and the way we look at people's needs so that we can all be empowered to make the best choices for the people we're trying to empower. And cash is not a magic bullet, but it can do a lot more than kind of what we're doing right now, right? And I think that's a bit the bottom line.
Fouad, any final thoughts?
Yeah, maybe two thoughts. One, to continue on what we're discussing on when we're asking for funding or anything. Yes, we do understand the drive for efficiency, for cost efficiency, and this is something that's driving our world right now. But then impact on the people we serve should be coming first. It should be prioritized, or else you can try loading millions of dollars to a helicopter and just dump them over an affected area, and let's see what happens. So that's one. And then last point on digital and on AI and all of that. This is great. We need to really know how to use it. Because, if I give my car to my 7-year-old daughter, I cannot expect her to come back home safe. Well, maybe she does, but I cannot. So with our systems, with our instructions, with our processes, we are really almost like my daughter driving the car when it comes to AI. So we really need to start looking at our systems internally and see if we are ready before bringing on this monster into our backyard. So I'm not saying no to it, yes, but let's start from inside, preparing ourselves, because this is the future, and this is how we need to make sure that we are able to use it for the benefit and not the other way around. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Louise?
Just very quickly, thank you very much for an amazing conversation and great debate. How can we help you do more with less by offering greater choice at the last mile through working collaboratively to innovate sector-based solutions, to aggregate where aggregation is possible and of value, and how can we have deeper and more meaningful partnerships so that we can support you in your goals and deliver the impact that we want and the outcomes that we're looking to achieve. So just thank you very much. Great conversation.
Well, thank you all. And Carmen, thank you. Alyosha, thanks. Louise, Elisa, Fuad, it's been great to have you here. Thank you to everyone in the audience. I went over by a few minutes, so appreciate your patience. Just a couple of things. You see this QR code here. This is where, many of you, if you registered, should have it in your email, but that's where you can download the report. If you want to take a picture of that, that will take you to the link to download it. There's also, I think, a card in front of you that has a link to it as well. If you are for those that have joined us over Zoom, you've also, even though it might be hard to take a picture of that, you should have a copy in your inbox. I want to thank Louise and Visa. Thank you so much for this partnership. It's been a great one, and there'll be more content coming out over the coming weeks and months over some of the findings that we came up with. And yeah, just for everyone else, keep an eye on more content that's coming out on this. And sign up to our Devex newsletters if you haven't already. Sign up to Devex Pro if you haven't already. And thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.